Hi, good day. I'm Pieter Jordaan from Seeff Properties in George, and today I've got Izak Venter with me from MMO, and we're going to discuss a topic that is quite important into the real estate industry, and that is the topic of a condition report. Now, Izak, tell me, what is the importance of a condition report for the seller?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, it's one of those very irritating things, unfortunately. Sellers complain about having to sign this form, but this actually protects the seller, and it also serves as a kind of reminder of issues that they may have forgotten about. So the property condition report asks 11 questions of material defects in properties that we frequently encounter which were not disclosed. So the property condition report asks the seller to confirm whether he's aware of any defects in those 11 categories, and if he is, he needs to expand on it. So it definitely serves a good purpose because it does help the seller. It reminds him of these issues and to record before the sale that this is a problem, so that it doesn't become a problem afterwards.
Izak, thank you very much. And what is the importance of a condition report for the buyer?
Yes, of course, this is the most important. Remember, in South African law, if there's a footsteps clause in a deed of sale, there's no general duty on a seller to disclose all known defects. The onus is on a purchaser to inspect the property and make sure that he's happy with the condition thereof, because he buys the property in its current condition and footsteps, which means with all patent defects. So he must look at this property condition report and see what is marked here and realize that this is not a list of issues that will be fixed by the seller. It's just a list of issues that the seller declares is a problem on this property. It is not that the seller has any duty to repair those defects. There's a bit of a misconnect there. So the purchaser needs to take note and needs to take a decision then, am I prepared to accept the property in that condition with those defects? But remember, it's only the defects that the seller is aware of that needs to be disclosed.
Okay, but what does it cover and what is excluded at the end of the day?
Yeah, so there are 11 questions being asked. It covers only material defects. So it's not a comprehensive list of all defects in the property. Not every crack, not every cigarette burn on a carpet, not every problem with every cupboard is necessarily a material defect. It only covers material defects, which, if you look at the definition of a defect in the property condition report, it's something that shortens the lifespan of the property or endangers the life of the inhabitants thereof or has a detrimental effect on the market value of the property. So those are serious defects that need to be disclosed. If it's not that serious, then it's not on that list, and the purchaser needs to be aware that he needs to still inspect the property and make sure of other defects that are patently visible, that he can see, something that would be discoverable upon examination, in other words, inspection of the property by the purchaser, because he buys the property in that condition and will have no recourse against the seller if he finds that defect after transfer.
Great, but you mentioned the footsteps clause a little bit earlier in your conversation, but what is the impact of a footsteps clause?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Peter. The footsteps clause is protection for the seller. It states that the purchaser buys the property with all patent defects later discovered that wasn't possible to be identified before on inspection by the purchaser. The seller is protected from any claims unless the seller knew about that defect and purposefully, with the intention to defraud the purpose, withheld that or hid that defect from the purchaser. And that's a very difficult thing to prove in court.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you. And what happens if there is no condition report?
Oh, yes, that's an important question. Because if there's no property condition report signed by the parties, the Property Practitioners Act states it will be deemed as if no defects were disclosed. So even though the seller did disclose some defects, if the property condition report is not signed and provided, the Act says it will be deemed as if they were not. So it opens the seller up to a lot of litigation and puts him in a very dangerous and precarious position.
So thank you. Coming to mind, I'm thinking about if, say for instance, the seller would own a property and he would rent it out, and now we want to sell it. He's never stayed in the property for the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Now they come to a point that they're selling the property. They only declare on the condition report what they know. Say for instance there's a leak under the zinc. Who's responsible for that defect, because the seller didn't know about it.
Yeah.
The purchaser didn't look under the cupboard. So I know, suppose it comes into a footsteps clause, but you know how it handles in terms of a condition report.
Yes, again, a good question. But first of all, remember that a defect needs to be material, so it needs to either affect the market value, the health of the occupants, or the lifespan of the property. Now, one can argue with a drain pipe could have an adverse impact on the structure of the property, so potentially yes. And of course, we get that frequently after transfer. There's always some defects that are only discovered after transfer. The problem is that in terms of the property condition report, it says it's for the material defects of which the seller is aware. And they've changed the definition of aware in the newest form of the property condition report. It now says to have aware means to have actual knowledge. So if the seller didn't know about that leak because it was never reported by the tenants, then the seller didn't know. And he didn't need to disclose because he didn't have actual knowledge. In my experience though, tenants are very quick to complain.
Yeah.
And there's usually a record of complaints, and it's actually quite possible to prove, quite easy to prove then, that the seller did have actual knowledge about that defect. But of course it is possible that he didn't.
No, I think every sale is unique, and all the circumstances is different. Because what we've experienced out of over the years is that the seller might even stay in the property, but they're so used to that defect that it doesn't bother them. They don't even take notice of that defect at the end of the day. Only when the new buyer comes into the property, then they actually see this defect, and then they ask the question, why wasn't it reported?
Yeah.
And then it creates problems afterwards. So it is important. One other question, the last question I would like to ask is it the agent's duty to fill in the condition report?
No. It needs to be completed by the seller. Of course, the agent can sit in front of the seller, ask the question, and complete the form. But it's very important that the seller works through that form and answers those questions honestly, and then signs at the bottom, taking responsibility for the content of that property condition report.
All right, so at the end of the day, if we take everything into account, it actually goes to, in terms of transparency. So the condition report comes to light, brings everything to light, and is getting transparent. Now, I think that is the important thing about this, and that is why we, from Seeff and George especially, promote to fill in a condition report that is accurate, that is right, and that is ethical. So Izak, thank you very much. I think a lot of questions has been answered. And if any one of you needs some more information, you're welcome to make contact with Izak, make contact with us, and then we will guide you into the right way, so on. So yeah, thank you very much, Izak. Thank you very much for listening to us, and have a lovely, awesome day. And then we'll chat again. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Pieter. Goodbye.